Hello, fellow pilgrims on this little blue planet. My name is Mundy. This adorable creature is Caper, and as you can tell by my thumbnail, I had my passport stolen in Madrid. So in this video, I'm going to tell you how it happened, what was stolen, what I did, and what I would do differently, so that you can learn from my mistakes. It was a mistake. It was completely my fault. But anyway, allow me to tell you the saga, the story, if you like. So sit back, relax, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. To set the scene, the partner and I had a wonderful and excellent adventure walking the Camino. We had done our walk in 11 days, and now it was time for a holiday. I had never been to Europe before, so it was time to see the sights. So we had a wonderful time in Santiago, and now we were in Madrid. And I really like Madrid. It's a fabulous place. It's a curious mixture of very touristy and, very not touristy, a place where people actually live. And we were staying in the touristy center of Madrid, having a wonderful time. I can tell you the disaster, and let's call it that, the disaster happened on a Saturday, which is not a convenient time, and I'll explain why in a minute. But we'd had a wonderful time wandering around, seeing the sights, and it was definitely time for something to eat. And something I will say that Madrid does, cafes and restaurants and things like that very, very well. Never had a bad wine in the whole time that we were away. Superb. Anyway, we found ourselves at this restaurant, and it was a beautiful day, and we sat outside at some tables. Where we were, there was people walking past, to get into the restaurant. Behind me was a table, so it wasn't like I was at, wandering past street anybody could grab, and I stupidly, please note, stupidly took my bum bag off, which I'd been wearing kind of like as a crossover, and I took it off and I placed it on the back of my chair. And that was my mistake. Please do not do that. We got distracted. We were ordering things off the menu, choosing our wine, all that sort of stuff, discussing the fabulous day, and gone, just like that. Fortunately, this very phone that I'm recording the video on was not in the bum bag. That would have been a complete and utter, totally different, epic disaster. As it was, it turned out to be a very expensive and inconvenient mistake. So, first things first, do not take your bum bag off and stick it over the back of the chair. Have it at least on the table within view, or wrap it around you. Don't take it out of your sight. The second thing was that, like I said, I was very unfortunate, and I had my phone with my credit card and my driver's license with me. It would have been a completely different thing if I had lost my phone, including my credit card as well. As it turned out, I'll tell you, and I'll show you some of the things that were actually taken, because of course I've had to replace them. And I'll just show you what a complete and utter inconvenience it was before I tell you about what I did next to mitigate the disaster. Of course, in the bum bag was the passport. Now, this is a temporary passport, and I'll explain what happens with these shortly. But also in my bum bag was my credentials that I had worked so hard to get and to, fill out. Now, the credentials are full of stamps that you collect, like your Pokemon Go kind of a way. And this happens to be my partner's one, which is very fortunate because we did exactly the same stamps in order. So I'm in the process of photocopying this and getting this framed. But I lost that, and to be honest, I was actually quite devastated about this. The other thing that was terribly inconvenient was the fact that I was wearing my prescription sunglasses and my prescription everyday glasses were taken. That was incredibly difficult because I thought, what am I going to do? I had another 2.5 weeks worth of holiday, and this pair, you know, my spare pair, was here in Australia. What was I to do? So that really made my heart sink. Fortunately, that kind of got dealt with straight away. But there was the other thing, that I lost my asthma puffer. Now, I don't use my asthma puffer terribly often, but I do on occasions. And of course, that went. And in Spain, you need to have a prescription to get one. Unlike here in Australia, you can wander into any pharmacy and tell them that you need one and you can purchase one. Fortunately, there was a pharmacy and she could see how distraught I was and that I really needed this, and she let me buy it without a prescription, which was incredibly kind of her. I lost things like my lip gloss. I lost things like my eye drops. Fortunately, I had other bottles of it at home because, as you can tell with my blinking, I have dry eyes and I really need to have my eye drops with me. I put them in many times during the day. I lost my hairbrush and I was quite upset about that one because it had been my mum's and she passed away last year. I lost things like, hand cream and, just the usual kind of shizzle that you would normally carry around in a bum bag, or I do because I am my mother's daughter, and, you never know what you could find in a handbag, and my bum bag was really like a handbag to me. But it was the passport, the puffer, and my reading glass, or my everyday prescription glasses, which really were very, very inconvenient. So I've told you what happened with the puffer, and that was an easy fix. But I will say that the glasses were not so easy, and neither were the passport. So, of course, this happened on a Saturday afternoon. Yes, the next part of the epic adventure. So, Saturday afternoon, dashed off to the local police station and wait. They were very kind, they understood, but apparently at that particular police station, at least 200 bags get stolen, which means potentially with all the tourists there, about 200 passports a week get stolen. So after waiting about 3 hours, I was able to go in. Fortunately, I did have a driver's license. My partner was with me, so we could verify the story, and they write it all down. And then, of course, in the process of us waiting, I thought, okay, what are we going to do now about the fact that my passport, my ID, has been stolen? Do I panic or not? So I rang the Australian consulate here in Australia. You can look it up online. Thank goodness for Google. And this Australian bloke obviously picked up the phone, and I told him what had happened, and he was actually surprisingly blasé about it, because I was very concerned about identity theft, as you can imagine. And also, well, I'm stuck now. I need a passport. I can't go anywhere. And we were due to go to Barcelona on Sunday. So I told him this, and he was very sympathetic, and he said, I'm very sorry, but you can't go to Barcelona. And I said, what do you mean? I'm getting on the train tomorrow. We've got, everything organised. And he said, I'm really sorry, but you have to stay in Madrid. You have to go to the Australian consulate, and there is only one in Madrid. There is nothing in Barcelona. So of course that mucked up all the plans. We had to, it was a very expensive exercise, all of this. We were moving out of our Airbnb anyway, and that's the home that I meant when I said my eye drops were there. We were moving out anyway, and we had organised an Airbnb in Barcelona, but money got lost there. We'd organised train tickets. That was gone too. Okay, the Barcelona to Paris one, that was refundable, but it meant we didn't go to Paris. it did mean that we stayed about 6 days in Madrid. And look, had a lovely time in Madrid, but it was annoying because I really wanted to go to Barcelona for a lot longer. Anyway, the most important thing was to get a new passport. So we had to organise, and when I say we, partner, organised a new Airbnb for us to stay that was closer to where the Australian embassy or consulate was. And of course, because it was on a weekend, we had to wait till Monday, couldn't do anything. But he said, don't panic. When I say he, the guy who I rang said, look, don't panic because of all the e-card electronic things that is embedded in the Australian passport, it's okay. So that was all right. But then I had the problem of what am I going to do about my glasses? So there was, I looked online, as you do, and there was, not that far away, an excellent optometrist that was going to be open till much later, like about 7 o'clock. And within an hour, which I was remarkably impressed with, they did an eye test for me and I got a new pair of glasses. This pair. They cost me 150 euros and an hour of my time. And I was so grateful that I could get this pair of glasses. But I will say that my eyes I have triple focal. They only picked up on the double focal here. So I was fine with, for the next few weeks up to about 6 meters. Anything further than that was a tad blurry, but luckily I wasn't driving. But I was very grateful to be able to read, to be able to, see things close enough. And I was wearing my prescription sunglasses anyway. But anyway, that's what happened on the Saturday. We, got to the police station and also rang the Australian consulate. On Monday, we made our way to the Australian consulate and you go through security downstairs, you go through security at the consulate, which is all very well. The tricky or the disconcerting bit was you had to hand over your mobile phone when you're at the consulate, but hey, whatever. Fortunately, like I've said, I've had my phone, my credit cards were not in the bum bag, they were with me, and I had my driver's license. So I had all the things, including the police report, to verify my story to take to the consulate. And I had to redo my passport application, and within 24 hours, I had a new temporary passport, this one, which was fantastic. I was so impressed with the service actually, but it's only valid for 7 months, and of course it doesn't have all the electronic stuff with it. It really is a temporary passport, but it did mean that I could leave Spain and we could fly directly to London. Like I said, missed out on Paris, never mind. Did go to Barcelona for 2 nights instead of 3, but that's okay. I got to dunk my feet in the Mediterranean, which was the main point, and of course to do the Gaudi thing. Excellent. Anyway, we could get to London and then we could fly from Gatwick to Doha, which I thought may be problematic because Qatar, however you say it, are one of the few countries that don't let you enter the country without a proper passport that, has a lot of time on it. Indonesia is another one. This one only gives me 7 months, but rang Qatar and can't remember exactly who, but anyway, got to speak to somebody who assured me that because we were just transiting, it would be fine and I could get home. Because that was the most important thing. And how am I going to get back to Australia? My passport was taken, but it all worked out very well. But like I said, it did cost, it cost inconvenience, time. The new passport cost 162 euros, which is, a temporary thing, but I still had another 6 years on my passport, never mind. So the temporary passport, I'm in the process of getting myself a new one. The glasses, the time, the losing money on the train, losing money from Airbnb, booking a new Airbnb, it really was a terribly expensive mistake. Don't do that. The most important thing is do not take the bum bag off. But I do have some other hints and tips for you also. In case a disaster like this does befall you, it would be helpful to have a few things sort of, in place so that you can mitigate the problem. I think that from now on, I will never travel without my prescription. You go to the optometrist, and especially with me, having triple focal glasses, I think from now on I will always travel with at least a photocopy, or at least a photo on my phone that I will email to myself, so that I will always have it in case the phone wanders off. I think too that I will do the same with my driver's license and my passport, so I've got the details. So take a photograph of that and email it to yourself in case the passport, along with everything else, and the phone goes. Like I said, a few times I was fortunate that my phone and my driver's license and my credit cards were not with me. I think that's a really important thing. Always have a pocket in your shorts or your jeans or whatever, preferably a zip up one, and make sure that your phone is with you within Kui at all times. I'm so grateful that my phone was not in my bag, because I think that would have just been beyond awful. And just keep be vigilant. I let my guard down. I was so cautious prior to, because I knew that there was pickpockets or people, that sort of stuff happened, but I just kind of forgot in the moment, and I just took it off. And I don't know who did it, I don't know how they did it, but it went, and honestly my heart sunk. It was just terrible. The partner was so kind and so gracious about it, which was truly lovely, and it was okay, and really it all turned out for the best. Really fell in love with Madrid, stayed at this fabulous place that honestly I could have just lived in. It was just so well appointed and such easy living. It was just so great. But yes, it was an expensive disaster that it really didn't need. But anyway, hopefully you've learnt some things, and I will say that you discover the kindness of people, like the lady in the pharmacy, so kind, and bending the rules a little bit. And also, I found out how remarkably efficient, the police, they were very busy, they were very kind, and it was great. And how I was so impressed with how quickly the consulate could replace the passport, even if it was a temporary one. So yeah, anyway, it all worked out for the best. I still would recommend a holiday in Spain and Madrid. But anyway, thank you very much for listening, and please like, share, subscribe, and the dog and I will see you again another time. Bye. Oh, by the way, Buen Camino.